It's amazing when you think about it. All the stuff buried beneath the ground, frozen in time, like those woolly mammoths they found in glaciers, right?
Right.
But get this, today's deep dive goes even further back in time. We're talking about ancient viruses they found in glacial ice, and it's pretty wild stuff.
And what's really got me hooked is the sheer scale of this discovery. They analyzed ice cores from the Tibetan Plateau and found genetic traces of, get this, 7,705 viral species.
1,705.
Yeah, that's more than 50 times anything they've ever found before.
Wow, 7,705. That's like a gold mine of viral history. How do they even find viruses in ice?
Well, they use this technique. It's called metagenomics. Basically, they do a genetic census of everything in that ice core sample. And by analyzing these teeny tiny genetic fragments, they can put together the genomes of those ancient viruses, almost like bringing them back to life. Digitally, of course.
So it's like they're analyzing little bits of genetic material like a detective would with DNA evidence.
Yeah, exactly. It's like forensic science, but on a microscopic level. And these fragments, they're from viruses that existed thousands of years ago, just trapped in those layers of ice. It's a glimpse into the past, and we're talking a span of about 41,000 years.
41,000 years. That means those viruses were around during some major climate change events. What's the connection there?
Well, the Tibetan Plateau is kind of a big deal for climate research. It's super sensitive to changes in the climate, so these ice cores they have, they hold a really detailed record of how the climate has fluctuated over time. By studying the viruses present during these different periods, we can see how they adapted to those big changes in the environment.
It's pretty amazing that something so small could survive for thousands of years in such an extreme environment. But I gotta ask, why study viruses in the first place? Aren't they usually, bad news?
Well, yeah, we tend to focus on the negative when it comes to viruses.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, they're not always the bad guys. Viruses have been around for billions of years.
Yeah.
Way longer than us. And they're a huge part of ecosystems, even influencing how life itself evolved.
Right. It's not just about disease. They're a big part of our planet's history. So what were these ancient viruses up to all those years ago?
So the research points to this unique viral community from about 11,500 years ago, and this was right at the end of the last ice age.
Interesting.
And this period, it's when we shifted from the last glacial stage to the Holocene. There was tons of warming then, glaciers were melting, a lot like what we're seeing today.
So as things warmed up, these viral communities, they were going through their own changes too. Makes you wonder what's happening right now with our climate, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what makes studying these ancient viruses so important. It's like a window into how viruses have handled climate change in the past. Might give us some clues about how they'll react in the future as our climate keeps changing.
Right, like a sneak peek through time.
Yeah.
But it's more than just predicting the future, right? This research also looked at how these viruses interacted with other life in their environment.
Exactly. Viruses, they're different from bacteria. They can't just replicate on their own. They need a host cell to do that for them. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They found that these ancient viruses were targeting a specific type of bacteria called flavobacterium, which is really common in these glacial environments.
Okay, so we have ancient viruses frozen for ages. They wake up and go after these flavobacterium. What happens then?
Well, it's not as simple as just infection and, the bacteria dying off. They found that the viruses were actually manipulating the bacteria like at a genetic level.
Whoa.
It's almost like a hostile takeover. But instead of just taking over a company, they're rewriting the entire genetic code.
So they're hacking the bacteria's operating system. That's amazing and kind of scary at the same time.
Right. Really challenges how we think about viruses.
Yeah.
They're not just these passive things. They're active, manipulating their host to survive. And in this case, doing it in a glacier. Talk about a harsh environment.
So how does that even work, this genetic manipulation? What are they doing to the flavobacterium?
Think of the virus like a master thief.
Okay.
It breaks into the bacteria's house, which is its genetic code, starts rearranging the furniture, changing the locks. Basically, it's hijacking the bacteria's whole metabolism. The viruses have these special genes that let them force the bacteria to make nutrients, the resources they need to thrive in these extreme conditions.
So it's like a parasitic relationship, but with this whole other level of manipulation.
Yeah.
These viruses are seriously resourceful.
Exactly. And that's a key thing from this research. We're just scratching the surface when it comes to understanding how complex and diverse viruses really are. It's a huge, intricate world out there. And this research gives us a glimpse into the crazy ways they've evolved to survive.
And speaking of survival, let's talk about the question everyone's thinking about. If these melting glaciers are releasing ancient bacteria and viruses, should we be worried?
It's a good question, and scientists are definitely keeping an eye on it. But it's important to remember this research isn't about freaking people out.
Right.
It's about understanding what the risks might be and being prepared.
Just because it's old doesn't mean it's going to, like, reach out and grab us, right?
Exactly, yeah. These viruses have been isolated for a really long time. Whether they could even infect anything today, especially us, that's a huge question mark. We just don't know enough yet. But we got to be cautious, but also, like, really curious about this stuff.
For sure. No need to panic, but it definitely makes you think. So what really stood out to you from all this research?
You know, it's their adaptability that blows me away. The fact that they evolved these, like, incredible ways to survive in such brutal conditions, manipulating their hosts on a genetic level, it just shows you the power of natural selection, you know, that constant back and forth between life forms.
Yeah, it's like a never-ending arms race. Viruses versus everything else, constantly developing new tactics. And with this research, we get a front row seat to that battle, playing out over thousands of years. Pretty cool, really.
Totally. And now, as we're dealing with climate change, well, this research takes on a whole new meaning.
I see what you mean.
If we can understand how viruses adapted in the past, it might give us clues about how to deal with potential outbreaks in the future, maybe even prevent them.
So while everyone's worried about the viruses of the future, the answers might actually be right there in the past, frozen in those glaciers. Kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. There's just so much we don't know about the world, especially those tiny little powerhouses, you know? Who knows what else is hidden away in those icy time capsules?
This deep dive has been quite a journey, from the science of it all, the metagenomics, to climate change and those amazingly adaptable viruses. It really makes you realize how important scientific exploration is, figuring out these complex systems that make our planet what it is.
Couldn't agree more. The more we understand these microscopic worlds, the better equipped we are to deal with whatever they throw at us, good or bad.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up our icy exploration of ancient viruses. Remember, folks, the world's full of surprises, and some of them come with a side of ancient viral DNA. Until next time, keep exploring.